Welcome to Season 10 of Talking with Traders as we begin 2025. We're into the fifth year of this podcast that began in 2020, and we've just surpassed 200,000 downloads of Talking with Traders. Once again, IG have come on board as the sponsor of this podcast. We're truly grateful to have such a global leader in online trading as our sponsors. In the coming weeks, I'll be interviewing various guests from around the globe on the topic of trading. Some of these will be past guests that we welcome back to the show, and some will be new guests. The idea is to attract a broad spectrum of different perspectives from players in various areas of the markets. None of what you hear here is financial advice, but it is intended to get you thinking about how you might be able to apply what you hear here to your own trading and investing. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast app. That way, you'll be notified when new episodes are released. Or if you watch these interviews on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up and leave a comment if you wish. We welcome the engagement. Once again, thank you to IG for sponsoring this podcast into its fifth year, and thank you, listeners, for your continued support. Now, let's get into this week's interview. We're heading further west this week. We're going over to Hawaii, of all places. Don't think I've ever interviewed anybody from Hawaii before, but there's always a first. And this week's guest is Kim Ann Curtin, who is the Wall Street coach. And Kim Ann, welcome to Talking with Traders. I've really been looking forward to speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Garth, for having me. I'm very excited to be here. It's a pleasure.
So you find yourself in Hawaii, but you weren't always obviously from Hawaii. You were the Wall Street coach, as the name suggests. You were very much in New York at one time.
Yes.
How long have you been in Hawaii?
Born in Brooklyn, and was living in Brooklyn actually before I moved to Hawaii. So yeah, I didn't expect Hawaii to be on the list, but John Lennon says life is busy. Life happens when you're busy making other plans. And so my book actually is what brought me to Hawaii, Transforming Wall Street, which its 10th anniversary is just in a few days. Wow. It came out March 15th, the Ides of March in 2000, when did it come out? 2015. So it's 10 years, this March 15th. So I came here because of a friend who lived here who knew about a long-term house sitting opportunity. So I thought, maybe I had done 90 interviews. I've been putting the book together for like a year and a half, and I just had to kind of get away from the city, get away from a lot of just the hustle and grind of getting business in the door. And I was like, maybe if I go to Hawaii, I'll have some peace and quiet and I can put the book together. So that is why I initially came here.
And you're still there 11 years later.
Well, yeah, because the book came out 10 years ago, but I came to Hawaii 11, 12 years before, because I was here a year and a half, took a year and a half to write the book. Right. And I got to stay here for the duration of that. And then I went back to New York initially for a few months. And then, I was doing things like smiling to people on the subway and walking up the subway stairs a little too slow. And people started to give me the stink eye, New York's version of it. And I was like, oh, I lost my New York juju, I think,
Yeah.
So I was like, and then I thought, I like smiling at people. I don't want to stop. And then the people I'd house that for, they had moved to South Africa. Actually, his parents were from South Africa, and they were needing some caretaking. So they said, hey, we need to go back. Can you come again? So I came a second time to house it for the same couple. And then I never left.
What a cool story. Well, let's go back to your beginning as the Wall Street coach. I'm intrigued to get a bit of your history in terms of what got you started to become the Wall Street coach.
Yes.
And I know it wasn't always easy for you in the beginning, getting clients and starting up a coaching business, which we'll talk about coaching as a, I think with most of this interview, we're going to chat about coaching, but I know there's quite an interesting backstory because I've listened to some of your other interviews with other podcasts. So just tell us about your background.
Thanks, Garth. You know, I hired a coach. That's really how a lot of this journey began for me. I worked at King Street Capital. It's one of the largest hedge funds in the world. And prior to that, I was in banking and finance for, in total, almost a decade for the whole stretch. I started at the Community Bankers Association of New York State. Then I was at another hedge fund. And then the last year of working in finance was at King Street. And I hired a coach when I was there, mostly because, even though you're well compensated, even though I felt I'm very strategic. I have really good big picture thinking, so to speak. And I know that I was good at what I did, and I'm certainly being, acknowledged for that. There was a part of me that wanted to find what I had heard Joseph Campbell mention, which was the bliss, that he felt we each were here to find our bliss. And because I heard that in my late teens, I was always on the hunt for that. And I was pretty sure that what I was doing at the time, which was C-suite level, executive assisting, personal assisting, kind of chief of staff, it didn't feel like my bliss. And so I think there was just that kind of hunger for what that bliss was. I had done landmark education. I had just done that course. It really opened my eyes to how I had had limiting beliefs and I'd had a very challenging youth, and homelessness was involved for my family of origin. Just a really messy collection of years. And because of all of that volatility growing up, I was, very conscious that I didn't want it to hold me back. And so when I did Landmark, it sort of awoke in me how the key that was missing for me was taking 100% responsibility for moving my life in another direction. And even though my life looked good on paper, I had a great job, I was doing well, there was just, I think, this knowledge that there was something else that I needed access to. Very fortunately for me, a very good friend, kind of suggested I do Landmark. He felt he heard a little bit of a victim mentality in my kind of storytelling about the journey of my life. And, the way he said that to me, it wasn't, there's people who tell you things with their ego just to make you feel shamed or wrong. He had no ego. He really told me in a neutral manner. And I attribute that to me being able to hear him. I didn't feel attacked. I mean, I was shocked. I was stunned, but I could tell he wasn't saying it to just be cruel. He was trying to say, hey, that could be stopping you from what you're here to really do. And I was like, God, what if he's right? So I did the course. It was a life-changing course. Highly recommend it if you ever have the chance. Any
What did you
listeners,
say? What did you say the course is called? Just so that we
it's called Landmark
Landmark.
Education. Yep,
Right.
Landmark Forum is a 3.5-day weekend.
Right.
That is just transformational in living from possibility as opposed to feeling like a victim of circumstance.
Right.
And so I did that course and I came out of it really clear. Wow, I now felt so empowered to create that bliss. So I thought, okay, I'm probably going to need some help to do this. So I hired a coach. And in that coaching experience, I was like, this is it. This is the bliss. Like what's happening for me in my coaching, I want to do this for people. How much better could it get? And so very shortly after starting my coaching, I wasn't even certified as a coach yet. At that point, anybody could call themselves a coach, but I put myself into a ICF certified training curriculum, which is called Coactive Coaching. CTI, the Coaches Training Institute, which I felt was the most robust curriculum available. And it was in person. It was very intense. But of course, I was already getting clients. Within probably a month of making the decision to become a coach, I had 8 paying clients.
Wow.
It was crazy. And I was like, Oh my God, this is moving so quick. But I think for me, it was like coming home. I just knew this was what I was born to do. And so finished my training and certification. But then the '08 crisis occurred. And so everybody stopped spending money. And so a friends, I had done the free hugs movement. I was part of that for a while. I don't know if you remember that. This was like probably about 2006, 2007, this guy, one man, was doing a free hugs movement around the world. So I had done that every Sunday after Thanksgiving with a group of friends in Columbus Circle in New York City. And we would just offer free hugs for a few hours. It was just a community building event. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And my friend said, hey, Kim, since business is down, this is, August, September of 2008. She's like, what if you did free coaching? Because you remember the free hugs thing you did. What if you did free coaching? I said, that's crazy. But like, I'm born to coach, so maybe I do it. So I sat outside the stock exchange on a bench on the corner of Broad and Wall. I was very nervous. I was in my best suit, my cashmere coat, like I was dressed to the nines, and I had a sign that said the coach is in, like Lucy in the Peanuts, where it says the doctor is in.
Right.
And a reporter a couple of days later saw me and interviewed me. And in that article, he called me the Wall Street coach. And I was like, that's a good name.
Great marketing as well.
I could buy that domain. And I bought the domain for $8.50.
Wow.
And have since, of course, trademarked it. So that's how it all began.
Fascinating. Now, in your LinkedIn bio, I love the sort of tagline. I guess it says helping executives, traders, and others end the cycle of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
Thought that was very hard hitting. It certainly hit home for me. And I've done work with a coach. I've done work with Stephen Goldstein, who I know you've spoken to on his Alpha.
Awesome. I love Steve.
Yeah, on his Alpha Mind podcast, and it's very valuable. I thought the program was fantastic, but I mean, I can see the benefit of coaching, but I still get the sense that despite it becoming more mainstream, it's not nearly as widely adopted in the finance world as it could be, and particularly amongst traders. And any idea on why that is? And I think it's changing. I sense there is, a more and more of a willingness, but trading, it's a very sort of egotistical industry, isn't it? Is that part of why trading's always been slow to take off?
Possibly, I think so, because there is this bravado or confidence that one has to have to a certain extent. It takes a lot of moxie to trade. It's going to ask you to have to bring a certain level of confidence with you. So I think the unfortunate cultural poison that we're all experiencing, men and women, but men especially, is that the culture tells men if they seek help, even just community with one another, they're, a wuss. And I think you can kind of insult a man harder than potentially having him feel called that or him thinking that about himself. So I think the idea of coaching potentially triggers a man's, wanting to protect himself from thinking to himself he's a wuss. And I think the horrible thing is that men are not seeing themselves as humans who have needs. They have needs for companionship, to be heard, to be seen. They have the need for respect, self-respect, respect from others. I think a lot of men have a tendency to not be in tune to what they need because they feel like they don't want to be needy. And I think that does a disservice to them. And if that is something that maybe they can take a look at and say, wow, what if this is just cutting me off from the extra gas my tank needs? Then maybe they can have a different relationship yes, to coaching, but I would say more important is their ability to seek uh, comradeship with their brothers, their fellow traders, their fellow, colleagues who are in the thick of it, because they don't even share with each other their suffering or pain or grief or anger. They keep it all locked in inside. And I'd say just even one guy in a Discord room that you kind of have a banter with, be a little vulnerable once in a while. He will probably be vulnerable in return. You
Yeah.
don't have to look like you're, Mr. Man all the time. And it doesn't mean you're a wuss. It means you're human.
Yeah, yeah.
Human.
Listening to what you're saying there, I'm sort of thinking, is this something to do with men's template, historical template about, men are supposed to be these brave warriors, never show vulnerability, cowboys don't cry, all that kind of thing. And, is that part of it? That there's this
Of
bravado that
course
we've
it
got to
is.
keep it up?
Of course, this has been indoctrinated for eons. Men didn't come up with this on their own. I mean, this has been culturally shoved down your throats. The cowboy for the Marlboro man. Like, I mean, we're all, like women too, we've all been brainwashed by these images of what masculinity looks like. I won't mention any names, but there's certainly a lot of guys out there in the manosphere who are keeping that whole imagery thing going, like the it's like that's why I had Matthew McConaughey. I asked him on my podcast, we both have a mutual friend, and I'm not trying to name drop, but the reason I wanted him on my podcast, besides the fact that he's Matthew McConaughey, is because I felt his book, Green Lights, and his whole philosophy and philosophical approach. He is such a man's man, a guy's guy, but he also talks about the importance of being self-reflective, of asking for help when you need it. So I just felt like, God, he's like one of the only male role models out there who is not insecure, showing his sides that are not perfect. He's comfortable with his humanity, not just with the bravado. And he has a lot of bravado, but he also lets his humanity show. So I felt like, God, he's a great example for men to see. You can be both. It's not either or, it's not one or the other.
Oh, I didn't realize that you had interviewed him. I'm going to go and look for that because I've read his book Green Lights, and
Wasn't he
I
great?
listened to it. I listened to the audiobook, which he actually narrates himself as well, and
Oh,
it's brilliant. It's brilliant
it's
because obviously you get
brilliant.
his voice coming over, and then his all what's it? All right, all right, all right. It's his sort of trademark.
Totally,
But you're
totally.
right. I mean, in that book, he certainly does kind of open up a bit about his vulnerabilities. It's interesting because he is, as you say, he's the sort of like alpha male character, but he
Exactly.
but he but
But
he was able to open up quite openly in a lot of ways in that book. I
he
found it
was.
really
He
interesting.
was. And I had read that book and I thought, gosh, for men's sake, I wish they had more of these kind of role models, because you have to kind of see it emulated in the culture. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of that being emulated. A documentary I'd love to just give a shout out to is a documentary called The Mask You Live In. And that is about this cultural indoctrination that men have all been put through since grade school. I mean, the interview is with Joe Erdman, as a former football player, possibly a former football coach. And he opens it with, he says, the most dangerous words that you can ever say to a little boy or to a man is the day when they first hear, be a man. He's like, because what the hell does that mean anyway?
Mm.
But we all get the impression that it means don't be weak, don't be a wuss, don't have feelings, don't have needs. And he's like, it's very dangerous because then guys are made to feel like they can't let their humanity ever show.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. I'm curious to know in your coaching work that you do, and I mean, I know you do, executives, traders. I'm not sure what percentage of your work is traders versus executives? I don't know
It's
if
been
it.
more traders in the last handful of years. I
Okay.
think because my podcast, I got hired by the Steady Trade podcast 5, 6 years ago, and I was on there for a good 3 years.
Wow.
And that I think started to just bring me. I've always had traders. Most of the traders when I first started, though, were institutional traders. They were at big banks,
Mm,
institutional type traders. I did have some independent traders because some of those guys would leave the bank, start their own hedge funds.
yeah.
But for the past, majority, I've been a coach now 18 years, maybe
Wow.
more. But the last 5, 6 years, it's really taken a bit pivot towards, 7, 8 figure traders.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, in terms of the demographics, are most of those males, I presume?
They are. I have had some women trading clients as well, but they have mostly been males.
And the reason I ask that is, and this is just my own curiosity, you being a woman, and you certainly come across as a fairly maternal figure. Do you think that it's easier for these brave, traders that are, the big swinging dick in the room, right?
Yep.
To make themselves vulnerable in front of somebody like yourself, as
Yeah.
opposed to another male coach who may have had a successful career in business or trading or whatever elsewhere prior to
Yeah.
being a coach.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think that is true to a certain extent that women in general do have that, kind of experience. We are, the vessels that life comes out of. There is this motherly, maternal kind of caretaking energy that every woman has. Not every woman, maybe, but a lot of women. And I do think that is a place where you can feel more safe to be vulnerable. That being said, I just want to say that I am also I think part of what I bring that is unique about me because the journey I've had, I don't have judgment. I have obviously heard some amazing, unbelievable, unexpected things in 18 years of coaching. But because of the life I've lived, I don't really judge people. And that is a quality that I think because of the journey of my life, I have developed. I don't think you can fake that.
Mm.
But I really get that whenever people have costly behavior, there is a impetus for that. There's a reason, there's a trigger that caused that. And that helps me come into things with no judgment. And I also will call a spade a spade. Most times, the clients that I work with, they're like, oof, that was a hard truth you just laid on my lap, and I don't like it. So it can be sort of disarming because I think that sense of, okay, she's not going to judge me, but I am not going to pussyfoot around when I see you self-sabotaging or creating more pain for yourself. But if I can deliver it like I spoke to that friend of mine who called me out on the victim mentality that I had, if I keep doing the work on myself, then I can call that out on somebody without coming across mean, but just being honest. And I think that too is part of what people come to me for because, most of it's referrals. And so they experience like, wow, you're so nice and friendly, Kim, when you're on your podcast, but this is different when you're coaching me. They get a little like, this is hard. And I'm like, yeah, like this is not going to be a cakewalk.
Yeah.
If you want change, I'm going to have to point out the places, the dragons you don't want to face. Like you're going to have to reconcile with them if you want to actually heal and transform.
Yeah.
That is a required. You have to face those dragons, and that's scary. So you have, and I also believe, Garth, too. I am never going to ask somebody to do something that I myself have not had to do. Obviously, I'm not a trader, but I have been willing to choose truth over comfort for decades. I don't think the the assignments or homework that I give to my clients, I could really ask them if I myself had not also had to face those dragons myself.
Yeah.
And that, I think, perhaps facilitates a journey, a fellow journeyman on the adventure together. I'm not the expert. I'm not sitting on high looking down to those and telling them this is how. No, I'm like, this is what I did. This is what worked for me. It was hard as blank. And I got you, and I'm going to stand by your side as you have to go through the fires you have to go through. But that is a non-negotiable in my experience to transform. And so you can do it. If I could do it, you could do it, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still doing it. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I'm done. If I'm living above the earth, 6 feet above the ground, I got work to do. I kind of feel that way, but I keep doing the work for myself too. So I'm not just saying, oh, I'm done. I got it all figured out. I don't. I have my
Yeah.
own dragons. I just faced one 24 hours ago that I was like, ooh, I got to take that on. But I'm willing to face that discomfort because I'm committed to being as aware and awake as I can be.
Okay. Fascinating. So, something that you spoke about in one of your podcasts that I listened to was that you treat your clients as if they are Olympians, your trading clients, and I enjoyed that because this also talks to somewhat to the more physiological aspects, which
Yeah,
on so not the intellectual aspects, not the analysis and the risk management and all of
right,
those things of trading, but it's all the other stuff that contributes to your success in an indirect, well, in a very direct way, but I suppose
right. Yeah,
from an indirect perspective,
yeah,
things like your nutrition, your hydration, sleep, exercise. I want to talk to you a little bit about that because you talked about giving your clients homework.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So,
this external physiological stuff fascinates me,
yeah.
and how you
It,
bring that into coaching.
it's all thanks to Dr. John Coates. His book, The Hour Between Dog and Wolf, is a book I read 12 years ago, 11 years ago. That's when it came out. And he basically was a former trader at a derivatives desk. Was he at Credit Suisse or Goldman? I can't recall now. I think it was Goldman. And so he was a trader for many years. He was fascinated about the boom and bust cycles he saw happening with other traders at his desk himself. He was fascinated with it. So in the end, he winds up becoming a neuroscientist, and he wanted to study this. And so there's a study that he did, it's really not recent. This is like 15, 20 years ago, a study where he checked 100 traders at a London trading desks testosterone levels in the morning. And those levels, if they weren't at a certain height, certain level, they were not profitable. So he was able to prove that testosterone levels in the morning could predict profitability.
Wow.
And once I read that, I was like, what? Like, how is any trading desk going forward without checking their T levels every morning? And the effects of cortisol and the effects of stress. And why does a bust happen? It's contagious. It's contagious. Traders panic in mass. And he was also, John Coates was writing about how he felt we have to pay attention to prevent these crashes because they are a physiological event that is like a virus spreading, just like probably it did yesterday, right? With the
Mm.
market. Today's
Mm.
March 4th. So yesterday
Yeah.
was a pretty harrowing day.
Yeah.
But that is the contagion of, fear and terror, and cortisol goes right through the roof. So I was looking for years to collaborate with getting these levels checked, especially because 30, 40-year-old men now across the board notoriously have low testosterone levels. Nobody's sure why that's happening across this whole cohort, but it is happening. So very fortunately, I partnered recently with Marek Health, and I'm able to offer a 84 biomarker lab work with them. And really discounted price because I feel these levels have to be checked. I know myself, when I first started working with a homeopath, homeopaths, at least in the United States, have a tendency to be more broad in the blood work they do with you versus a standard Western doctor. They don't usually check as deeply as a homeopath does or as deeply as Marek does now. But when I first did my own lab work with her, probably 12 years ago here in Hawaii, even my adrenals were compromised. And even taking just a very, very basic supplement of adrenal support, I saw a difference in my energy levels. I was very fortunate to have, other good levels. But I just think today it's important for traders to see themselves or treat themselves like an Olympian treats themselves. We wouldn't expect, somebody to eat terribly, not have sleep, drink a lot of booze, and then take a big meet on the next day. I feel like maybe some traders don't realize that their ability to show up consistently, pay close attention. I have a neuroscientist coming on the podcast actually in a week or so. He was just on Huberman's lab, Dr. Platt, because he talked all about behavior is driven by our biology, and we have to be in tune with it and try to, manage it the best we can. Nobody's going to be perfect, but can you at least get clear on what are your biomarkers? If your T levels are, and too much testosterone too, because there's a lot of guys now who are getting a lot of they're taking shots of testosterone. And I think that can also be just as dangerous as too little. So you have too much, which is what happens when you start having wins, right? If you have multiple wins in a row as a trader, your testosterone levels rise. And what happens? Oh, you start to feel like you're a master of the universe. That is a physiological occurrence. So you've got to be so conscious of the fact, oh, I've just had a couple of losses. Cortisol is probably being spiked. I've just had a couple of wins. My testosterone levels now are making me think I could rule the world. Like be conscious of these things happening within you so that you don't get as easily hijacked. You can at least have a little bit of an observer or witness looking at yourself so that you don't just get taken away on the wave of whatever's happening to you physiologically.
Okay. So interesting that. In terms of a return on investment when it comes to coaching, this is something I've always figured is interesting because it's quite difficult to pin a number on it, isn't it? It's a bit of a sort of a little bit of an esoteric thing, I suppose. But yet I know that there was a study done, I think you referenced it on a previous podcast, where the actual return on investment was talked about. And somehow, I mean, I don't know how they calculate this, but actually it was shown to be enormous, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the studies said over 500% return on investment, those who work with a coach. And Stephen's colleague, whose name escapes me right now on that
Mark Randall.
Mark had heard of a study where it was something like 2,000% return. Wow. So I don't remember the source for his or the source for mine right now, but I know I have it someplace on my materials. But yeah, look, what I always say to clients is, if you are not seeing the value, the coaching's going to stop. Like, I'm not interested in working with somebody unless they feel what they're getting from me is doing what they wanted it to do. So, I think that's an easy metric, right? If it's not working, we stop. That's that. But I think for the people who really pay attention. Of course, I have traders who have done incredible things to their trading account and they've tracked it and they've told me how different their trading numbers were after working with me. I think it's important for traders to do that in a lot of different areas. Yes, with their coaching, but also this concept of what's happening for them in a day-to-day experience. The diary, the journaling that traders keep, often it is a lot of data that has to do with the trades they've taken, which is critical. But I don't know that as many, perhaps luck, like, had a rough night sleeping, baby cried all night, fight with wife, feeling the pressure to take care of my older elderly parents and finance their care. Like these other pieces are impacting the way that day goes. Are you coming to the market with scarcity? Are you coming to the market neutrally? And I think just knowing, okay, let me be conscious of these factors. What are the triggers today that I might feel? What are the needs that I don't have met? If you come into trading, one gal, which I've spoken to before about during the pandemic, she was a veteran trader, 10 years at it, not a risk taker in her trading. She was a fairly conservative trader, but she was taking unusual size risk. And when she came to me, and she was kind of like at a loss, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, it doesn't really make sense. But we unpacked it and discovered that one of her favorite things to do was weekend adventures. And the COVID shutdowns had closed all the places she always used to go. So what we discovered, and this is why it's so important for traders to know what needs they have, her need for adventure, her need for challenge, her need for excitement wasn't getting met in the weekends anymore. So she was trying to get it met in her trading. So once she saw that, she wasn't getting hijacked anymore because she was conscious of it now. But if you think about like all the different needs there are, a lot of times traders are seeking out their needs in their trading. And the key is get the met outside if you're trading. It's a lot less expensive.
That's such an interesting example. Wow. I think that could be a soundbite for this podcast. Um, Now, I mean, in terms of investment into trading, we know there's no shortage of money spent on things like analysis services and data systems and charting systems and risk management systems and computers that are faster than anybody else's computer and locations that are closer than anybody else's servers so that you get a fraction of a millisecond quicker than your competitors. I mean, all of this, there's a hell of a lot of money spent on all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I would still imagine that the amount of money spent on coaching is an absolutely infinitesimally small amount relative to what's spent on all of that other stuff.
I would
So,
agree.
but yet, I mean, just from listening to everything you've said, it's clear as day. And I know, having been on a coach with Stephen Goldstein, having done coaching, it's valuable. It's super valuable. It's probably more valuable, in fact, than all of these other things that I've referenced. How is the coaching industry generally trying to sort of frame itself so that it becomes more prominent as like a crucial component, and especially when it comes to trading, it's a crucial component, something that firms should be spending money on just as much as they're spending money on data and systems and
Yeah.
whatnot.
I'm with you, God. Thank you. I want to hire you up for my PR or for the PR agency that runs the coaching, reputation, because I think you're dead on. I don't think the coaching industry knows how to market itself. I mean, I've been a coach for 18 years and I'm trying to still figure out how to market myself. It's hard. It's a saturated market where a lot of people call themselves coaches. And I think in general, personal development work is the kind of work that an individual has to feel like that is what's going to serve me. But I think the part of the challenge of the coaching industry is that it's filled with people likely who just want to coach people. I don't think they're interested in becoming excellent salespeople. And I think that possibly is why it doesn't get publicized enough, because it's filled not with salesmen, but coaches who really want to be a contribution to people.
Yeah.
And that's what they wanted to. When I first started out, we were very fortunate to have a lot of business, and I had to have a team of coaches. And basically, all those coaches were so happy because I was going to be the rainmaker. I was going to hustle and go to the firms and get them jobs. They were like, Kim, we just want to coach. We don't want to go have to sell ourselves. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh God, this is going to be hard. I have to do all the selling. So I was doing a lot of selling, but I wasn't doing as much coaching, which is what I prefer to do.
Yeah.
So it's tricky, but I do agree with you that it would be great if the coaching industry or the self-development industry, could succeed at showing the return on investment. But, look, I think at the end of the day, people they have their own individual journey. I had my journey. I got the memo that it was time to have that experience at Landmark. It showed up. And I kind of think, like, even for your listeners, it could be that this is the conversation where somebody says, you know what, I'm going to give coaching a try. Maybe because it's Kim, I'm going to talk to her. Maybe because it's Stephen, maybe it's somebody else. Like, listen to your instinct. If your instinct says, oh, Landmark is the course, maybe I should check that out. The other course I'd love to give a shout out to is Mankind Project, which is specifically only for men. It is empowerment. It's called the New Warrior Training. I've sent a lot of my male clients to that intensive. It's like Landmark, but different, and it's all men. And these kind of courses, I think each of us, there's going to come a point in your life where you're feeling called to perhaps up level your mindset, or you're sick of listening to that inner saboteur, inner critic who's constantly making you feel like garbage. And if you feel like enough is enough, then look into coaching, look into personal development, because the only thing that's in the way of you having transformation is you getting tools. I'm just a tool. I am a collector of tools because of the journey I've had, because I had to get a lot of work done on myself. And I asked for my first therapist at 10 years old because I was like, whoa, this household, I'm going to need me some tools. So I've been collecting tools, and I'm telling everybody, take it from me. Once you get the tools, that's all you need. If you have a wrench that works on a Ford truck, that may not be the fit tool for the Porsche that you drive. Like, we just need the correct tools. So go to these courses, books, coaches, teachers, therapists, whomever, get the tools. And if you go to somebody and it doesn't feel like it's the tool you need, say thank you and go find somebody else. I've gone through plenty of coaches, therapists, teachers, because I was like, I knew what tools I wanted. And if they didn't have them, I just moved on.
So good. Fantastic. Well, we've come pretty much to the end of our time together, Kim, but I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. All that's left really is to just ask you, listeners to the podcast, if they would like to get in touch with you or follow your work or
Yeah.
possibly engage with you as a coach, if they're up to it, where do they get hold of you? And then the second thing is you mentioned that you have a podcast as well.
I
Uh,
do. I do.
where do we get that?
It's called The Wall Street Coach with Kim Ann Curtin, and it's on YouTube and Spotify and iTunes, all the places you can listen to podcasts. Obviously, YouTube has it with video, and I also do live coaching almost every Wednesday for traders, and do speed hot seats for traders so they can come in and have me coach them right there during the live broadcast. And they can find me. My handle on X is Kim Ann Curtin. Hold the A, it's Curtin. And there's a link of how to book a call with me. So I would encourage your listeners, if they're curious, they want to learn more, book a call with me. It's a complimentary discovery call, and we can talk, and I'll tell you what it is I do, hear what's going on for you in your trading. If it feels like I'm a match for you, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. I have lots of materials to share, books, and other coaches to refer you to if I'm not a fit.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a number of weeks since we set it up, and it's been everything I hoped it would be. So thank you, and Kim Ann Curtin from Hawaii. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Garth. It was really a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Talking with Traders, sponsored by IG, a world-leading CFD provider. We really are privileged to have such a strong global provider of online trading services as our backer for this podcast series. Remember to subscribe for more episodes by clicking on the subscribe button of your favorite podcast app, or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up, and leave a comment. We welcome the engagement. Till next time.